Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Life in the Red podcast. I'm Luke Mullin, joined by Amie just once again. And, usually these episodes are, break down last week football, break down our upcoming opponent. Well, today everything goes out of the window.
Yeah, just a little bit, right?
Yeah. So what we have in tune for you today, obviously we'll have all the discussion about head coach Scott Frost being fired, talk about the program being in flux a little bit. We'll touch on Georgia Southern, we'll touch on Oklahoma, briefly talk about volleyball as well. But, we need to get right into it. When you have a head coach get fired, obviously that's super important news. So Scott Frost, after 4+ seasons as head coach, 16-31 career record, he's out. And I think the first thing we got to talk about is why make the decision now for Trey Alberts?
Yeah, so when we spoke with Trev on Sunday, it feels like a million years ago now, even though we are recording on a Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, right? Yeah, it's Wednesday. I've lost track of all time. So when we spoke with Trev on Sunday, he was talking about, he wanted to instill hope in the team, and he wanted to, he just felt that it was right, and he owed this to the players, which I thought was interesting. But look, I get it, right? Like, a buyout aside, you have, Big Noon coming in this week, and the last thing I think that Nebraska wants to do is talk about the failures under Frost on national television when there's a pretty darn good football team coming in here that they're going to play on Saturday. So, and 2 losses in his career to teams from the Fun Belt. They had a lot of...
They sure did, yeah. Georgia Southern had a real good week.
They had
Money,
real
win,
fun.
They had it all, yeah.
So it just, at what point does it become too much? And I think last week's loss just was enough.
Yeah.
And, you wonder if this had been percolating since Ireland, but anyway you slice it, now the University of Nebraska felt that it was time to part ways.
Yeah, I think, on Trev's part, obviously, he's very smart about the narrative, obviously the national narrative. You still have Frost here with a 1-2 record. The whole week it's going to be talking about his struggles, about how it hasn't worked out. And obviously there's still going to be discussion about that, but at the same time it's about, turning a new page and moving forward from that. And, what I think was really important for Alberts is, you come into this new role as athletic director, and I think he knew it would have really caused a lot of ripples just firing Frost right away as one of his first acts as athletic director. I think he was smart to kind of let it play out. Perhaps, obviously, there was the financial incentive. They reworked the contract, obviously. We saw the off-season changes, too. I think there was a lot of hope, from Alberts and that athletic department that they'd be able to turn it around, that they wouldn't get to this point. And obviously, we heard from Trev in that press conference. He complimented Frost. He said he worked hard and, really wanted to revitalize this program. It just didn't work out the way that they wanted it to.
Yeah, and before the season, 1-2, if you would have told me they were 1-2, I wouldn't have believed it.
People would have been stunned everywhere,
This is not how I envisioned this going. I don't think this is how anyone envisioned this going. And yeah, it's just not a loss, honestly. I did think that even with what unfolded last week, that they would still wait until October 1st, which is when Scott Frost's buyout would be halved. But at the end of the day, you can only embarrass the University of Nebraska so much. It's a line I used in my column, and I still think that, if you've got the boosters who are going to pay for it, oh well, here we go.
Yeah.
And we're going to ride with Mickey Joseph for the rest of the season. 9 games to go.
Indeed. And, you have to wonder what, the preseason conversations were between Alberts and Frost. What were the metrics, the different things passed down from Alberts that he needed to see from Frost in this year. I have to imagine, probably winning those first 3 games was part of the equation. It's hard to say necessarily whether Alberts was like, you really gotta, win these games, or the pressure's on, from a athletic department standpoint. And I know after that Northwestern loss, obviously there was displeasure, among the athletic department. Now, if they beat Georgia Southern, we might still be sitting here with Frost as the head coach. But like you said, that loss really kind of pushed it over the edge. Just yet another, disappointment, having a team that you're projected to win by, 3 touchdowns, come here to Memorial Stadium, put up over 600 yards of offense. Obviously, they played fantastic, but, this wasn't Ohio State. This wasn't Wisconsin coming here for a blowout. It was Georgia Southern, a 3-win team last year. And if anything, that shows the level Nebraska's at right now. Because, something that stands out to me is the 4 straight losing seasons. That gets you canned at any FBS program, in my opinion. It doesn't matter whether it's Rutgers, Boston College,
Kansas.
Eastern Michigan, Kansas. Yeah, I mean, even programs that don't have a history of winning, at least they expect you to pull out a winning season or show, demonstrable, signs of progress in terms of your record, the games you play. And if anything, for Nebraska, it was just the same old story over and over again.
Yeah, and by the end, I felt that Frost no longer had answers. Listening back to his press conference after the loss against Georgia Southern, I don't think he knew what to say.
Yeah. It might have been a little bit of realization about, perhaps he might have had an inkling that this loss was perhaps going to do it in the end. And obviously it was less than a day, less than 12 hours. It really, transpired very quickly that Alberts moved to make the change. It's worth talking about a little bit deeper. Why didn't it work for Frost? Obviously, he was a very heavily sought after coach, making that move from Central Florida. Florida was very interested in him at the time. Obviously, they went with Dan Mullin. They've moved on since as well. So for me, the number one thing that stands out is the offensive scheme that really worked for him at Oregon and Central Florida. You get a lot of snaps, you move quick down the field, high-scoring offense. Things change a lot in the Big Ten. Obviously, heading into his tenure, he said infamously, I hope the Big Ten will have to adjust to us. That never happened. Nebraska had plenty of high-scoring games. It wasn't a case where the offense never performed, but the style, I think, never quite matched up to the Big Ten in the way they'd want it to.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know. Obviously, we can, look back, and hindsight's 20/20 and all of that, but I never quite understood we're going to make the Big Ten, adjust to us. I never quite understood that line, and that'll live in infamy, but I'm just at a loss. I really am, because I didn't foresee this happening. I mean, we look back almost 5 years ago, and most everyone was over the moon excited to bring Scott Frost in and change things up and have somebody who knows Nebraska restore Nebraska to what Nebraska should be. And here we are, just picking apart all of the faults. And no, there are so many of them. And it's just, we've had 4 days to wrap our heads around it. And no one saw it ending this way. Not 4 years ago, maybe last year, but not quite like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time there was probably a lot of public perspective that if Frost can't fix this mess, then who can? And I think that's a reason why a lot of fans are still, perhaps in support of him, upset that the athletic department made that change, because so many people did believe that Frost would be the guy to get this program back to national relevance. Obviously, someone who had been a big part of that success in the 90s, someone who understood the program, growing up in it. But perhaps, that was maybe a recipe for the losing seasons that we've had, because yes, Frost always had that confidence that had come together. And perhaps that was foolish confidence in some aspects. I think probably we would have needed to see changes to the offensive staff maybe a season sooner.
Yeah.
Could have prevented this. Obviously, he was very loyal to his guys for several seasons. And loyalty, obviously, an important trait, in college football, but perhaps it served him wrong in this instance. But to me, the biggest thing of all, Nebraska out-recruited pretty much everyone in the Big Ten West, top 20, top 25 recruiting classes coming in year on year. But so many of those guys never saw the field, never made an impact, transferred away. And I think, looking back at his first recruiting class that came in, you had Adrian Martinez, a several-year starter. You had some other guys who contributed for several seasons. But, ultimately, coaches are judged, in a 4-year tenure. That first recruiting class that you have when they're seniors, are you able to build up the program? And that just wasn't the case. That class did not turn out at all.
I saw a stat the other day that Nebraska is tied with another Big Ten West school of the most transfers over a recent period of time. I don't remember if it was 2, 3, or 4 years. Mm-hmm. But that's very telling.
Absolutely.
It's very telling. I don't know exactly what story it paints, but it's not a good one. Recruiting is about getting people here, but keeping them here. And what happens when you can't keep the talent here? It's just, you look at the transfer portal and how so many kids are in it. And I think fundamentally the transfer portal is a good thing. You can go get the Casey Thompsons and whatnot, but if you're relying on it for everything, it can be a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it's kind of, in some senses, it's kind of a crutch. If you don't develop the talent that you have in the building already, then just grab the talent that somebody else developed for a couple of years, which, is not necessarily always the case. But like I said, far too many talented recruits that just did not translate into an on-field impact, and a lot of guys that didn't reach the ceilings that they had. And personally, I don't think that's an individual athlete's fault. It goes down to, of course, the coaching, the program, the conditioning, everything that goes into putting a winning product on the field. And it just failed. Too many one-score games, sloppy, undisciplined play, and some of the same issues we saw in 2018 still here in 2022. And for me, that was the final nail in the coffin. But we can look forward now. Obviously, the Scott Frost era has come to an end. Mickey Joseph taking charge of the program for the next 9 games. And already a few changes in place. We heard from him on Tuesday. First one, players used to have the day off on Sunday. Now it's Monday. They'll be in the building Sunday. Presumably, in my opinion, for a very quick turnaround on film study, make sure those guys don't even have 24 hours, to put the game out of their memory. I think, to me, that change indicates if there's an issue on Saturday, they're going to want to get it addressed as soon as possible in that meeting room.
Yeah, and this is not a weird schedule. I've seen it in many places that I've been before, including in the NFL. You're done with your game, and the next day you're working on getting things. Yeah. You're fixing things, you're tweaking things, you're looking at things that worked well, so you can flush it and move on. And I think that can be a positive for them.
Absolutely. A few of the other changes, offensive analyst Mike Cassano, he'll now have an on-field role as the wide receivers coach. Mickey said, yes, he'll still be involved with that, but it's one of those things where as a head coach, there's so much that you're dealing with, not just on game day, but, leading up to the game, in practice. He's going to set the schedule, team issues, disciplinary. Just so much stuff logistic-wise.
Meeting with us, yes. Doing broadcast things. It's a very long list of responsibilities that you wouldn't otherwise think about. And so, yeah, it just makes sense for him to hand the day-to-day off to somebody else. But knowing Mickey, he'll be involved in there as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, those are his guys. He's been working with them all throughout spring and fall camp. So he's not going to let that go, most definitely. But we also heard on Tuesday, he was very candid. The defense needs to be improved. And a few of those changes, defensive coordinator Eric Chenander will be working with the safeties in practice, whereas defensive backs coach Travis Fisher, he'll work with the corners and the nickels. Again, hoping to focus more attention on those specific position groups, hoping that the different coaches can, bring something different, have two different, pairs of eyes and be able to look into some of those issues, but no issue bigger on defense than tackling. We've seen this on the field, that the tackling has not been good enough. Before he got fired, Frost was trying to, perhaps beat the drum that they can go one-on-ones in practice. Well, what we heard from Mickey so far, a lot of tackling in their first practice out, short, quick, intense practice, trying to get those guys game ready, which I think is exactly what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't understand the philosophy of not tackling in practice. I understand that you don't do it a lot, but you need to find that balance, because how can you know that you're good at something if you don't practice it? If the only time you ever practice it is in a game, is that really practicing? I don't think so.
That's a good question. Maybe we should have posed that one to the staff. But I mean, to your point, I think probably a lot of it is fear that those starters are going to get hurt.
I know. I've seen it. Again, not to bring up past stops, but at Kansas, the starting quarterback got tackled in the spring game and tore his ACL. So I understand the reasons why you don't want to, but you need to find that balance. You need to find the line. And I don't think under Frost they were close to finding that line. You have to practice tackling, whether that's with live plays, with dummies, whatever. And it didn't look like they were making any progress there. And hopefully, now that the page is being turned, we can find some semblance of progress there. Because as I've said, I think the defense has very talented players. They're just not coming together and doing the fundamental things that they need to do at the level that they need to do it. And once they get there, I think they'll be better. I know they'll be better. They just have to take the steps to get there.
Definitely. I mean, in regards to the tackling too, I think a lot of coaches would say anytime you're out there on the field, anyone can suffer an injury. Obviously, in practice, you're trying to mitigate risk. You know that in the actual games, that risk of injury is a lot higher. But to me, you can't just assume the worst. You can't just hide and cower from that. You really got to give those guys game action, and I think the players will be better off because of it. And further changes could come. Trev Albert's publicly supported Joseph's ability. He said he's the head coach. He can make whatever changes he deems fit. And in terms of his approach, from what I've seen from Mickey, I think he's kind of a tough love kind of guy. He'll work you hard, but from a place of love, knowing that it's going to make you better. Trying to get this roster Big Ten ready. And we touched on this briefly in the rapid reaction we shot on the field, but you've known Mickey for a while, dating back to your time at LSU. What do you know about his character and the way that his players responded to him then and now?
Yeah, I mean, Mickey has worked with some of the best wide receivers in the game right now, whether that be Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and we're seeing that, Nebraska can develop some of those guys too. Trey Palmer, one of the guys that, once Mickey left, wanted to be here. Like, there's a reason why, Trey wanted to follow Mickey. He spoke about how he looks at Mickey like a father figure. And I think that that's a common trait among a lot of his past receivers. But it's that tough love. Like, he's going to be hard on you, but he does it from a place of, he cares so much that he wants you to be better, that he's going to be hard on you. And that coaching isn't for everybody. Everybody's different. But I think that the guys who've been in the room with Mickey, regardless of where he's been, have appreciated that and have worked well with that for the most part.
Yeah, and that style I think is great for wide receivers, guys who are getting into one-on-one matchups, trying to beat the DBs. And I think it's what this team needs right now. They do not need to be coddled. They need to get a fire, lit under them, and really come out here strong in the last 9 games of the year. And we'll get into Georgia Southern and Oklahoma here briefly, but wanted to touch on Nebraska Volleyball. Obviously a very big match last night, going up against Stanford. Drops their first match of the season, but great crowd on hand. Obviously a great program in Stanford that usually gives Nebraska fits. Nicklin Hames leaves with an injury. Just what were your takeaways from the match?
Yeah, Nicklin, she was playing really well, and then it was like a switch flipped where she was missing some sets, and she came off the court crying, and went to a trainer and spent the rest of the match on the bench. Not sure how long she'll be out. Not sure exactly what was going on there, but hopefully she feels better soon. And yeah, so Kennedy Orr came in, cold, right? Because it's so late in the match. Yeah. She comes in, she does a fairly decent job. Still missed some of her sets. It's why Nicklin has been playing alongside Annie Evans in their 6-2 rotation using those two setters. But for coming in cold, I thought she did a pretty okay job. But the tail of the match is just errors at very inopportune times, whether those were service errors or, kills that went out. If you look at the stat sheet, and I wrote my column about this today, if you look at the stat sheet and just ignore the specific scores from each set, you would think Nebraska won the match. Because Stanford had so many service errors. It was a record in the rally scoring era against Nebraska. Mm-hmm. And the difference between Stanford service errors and Nebraska service errors, if you use that math with kills and the number of attack errors, on paper it looks like Nebraska wins, but it's just those poor timed errors, and got to fix those things. 2 points better. That's what Maddie Kubik said after the game. And you got to win those close sets, and when you don't, things like this happen, but not to be all doomsday. This happens, right? I mean, you look back last year, you look at 2018, 2017, 2015, all years where they've made a deep run in the tournament. They've lost 1, 2, or 3 non-conference matches against really talented teams, and they've rebounded well. And I think that this was a challenge that they needed. This weekend will also be a big challenge for them on the road at number 13, I believe, Kentucky, to close out the non-conference slate. Should be a learning opportunity, and we will see if the lessons learned go into effect immediately this weekend.
Yep. So, Huskers will probably drop a couple of spots in the rankings, but not a big deal at this point in the year for sure. And, these big non-conference games, that's what you need at this point in the year. Obviously, they had quite a few tune-ups, before this time. Creighton pushed them, gave them a great match as well. But, you get better from losing, from being tested like that. So we'll see how Nebraska Volleyball bounces back from that one. All right, well, let's get back to football now. As if we didn't spend enough time on it. We'll get more volleyball discussion in future weeks for sure. But let's talk a little bit about Georgia Southern, talk a little bit about Oklahoma, because it's important, for where we're at in the season. Obviously that Georgia Southern game, we talked about the Sunday presser feeling like years ago. This game is eons ago, is a completely different situation for Nebraska football to be in. One-on-one on the year, still a lot of, potential to keep the ball rolling, but this game completely changed things. The defense was just exposed, 642 yards of offense. Mm-hmm. Georgia Southern ran the ball with ease, threw the ball with ease, pretty much did whatever they want. The yardage was the most any opponent ever put up at Memorial Stadium. Another crazy stat for you. Nebraska had won 214 straight games while scoring 35 points or more at Memorial Stadium. Their first ever loss in one of those contests. So the takeaways from the game was offense was great. Mm-hmm. Casey Thompson, Anthony Grant, they both really played up to their potential. Casey, a couple tough touchdown runs. He made a lot of great throws. We look at that 98-yard drive deep in the fourth quarter. That's what winners do. But the defense just wasn't up to the standard.
No, and how do you expect your offense to succeed in that, right? They're doing everything that they can, but the defense has to get off the field. And it was an embarrassing production from them the other night. Couldn't stop anything. This is an air raid offense.
Yeah.
And they couldn't stop the run. Now, granted, Nebraska's run defense has shown through the first, 2 games that there were some significant tweaks that they needed to make there, and they just got royally embarrassed last week.
Mm-hmm. And right now, the run defense, by the way, 115th nationally out of 131 qualifying teams. I think overall defensive yardage, I think they're 125th out of 131. So a lot of improvements to be made. And when I look back at that Georgia Southern game, looked at a little bit of the film, trying to figure out what went wrong for the defense. What stood out to me was how often this team just sits in a 4-man rush, 2 linebackers in the box, and really put the safeties back, have the nickel in, which again, they schemed that for the passing offense. They knew the nickel needed to be a big part of their game plan, but I think we've seen the adjustments haven't been quick enough, and whatever Nebraska tried to throw at Georgia Southern on Saturday, the Eagles were just one step ahead. There were a couple times, where they'd blitz, send 6, and Van Treese get the ball out quick to the boundary, that one-on-one coverage. He did a great job beating those blitzes as well. But to me, I think the base setup with the 4-man front, the 2 linebackers, it just has not been working. I think Nebraska needs to find a way to bring more pressure or to change up the personnel groupings a little bit, because obviously Oklahoma, they'll have been looking at the film, they'll have been seeing the exact issues that Georgia Southern exploited, and I think they'll try to do some very similar things here on Saturday.
Yeah, if there aren't immediate adjustments made there, it's going to be worse. Hard to imagine that, but Oklahoma is in the top 10 for a reason.
Yep.
And it could be bad if changes aren't made now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Oklahoma team, which let's dive into that a little bit. And last week they struggled too, only leading Kent State 7-3 at halftime, and you're thinking, okay, maybe that'll lead to another close game here this week. Well, they score 24 points like bang, bang, bang out of halftime, just like they can. And the 33-3 final score line, I think pretty close to what Oklahoma would have wanted. I'm sure they would have liked a better first half performance, but this is a team that has the firepower to really string together drives. UCF transferred Dylan Gabriel. He's done a great job at quarterback. Marvin Mims there, a wide receiver, a true playmaker, going to be an all Big 12 wide receiver most likely. And the team's loaded with talent all over the ball. Defensively, I think that'll be the challenge. Can Casey Thompson and Anthony Grant muster enough offense to maybe keep a shootout going? And looking at head coach Brent Venables, he had his regularly press conference, he had a lot of praise for this Nebraska offense, saying they've got great talent, they've got great schemes, and he expects them to really test his defense.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? You're never going to hear a head coach talk ill of another team, right?
Unless they're crazy, I guess.
Brent Venables not crazy.
Yeah.
It's just, what a week, and it will only continue to get crazier. I truly think that Nebraska's offense can get something done this week, but Oklahoma's defense, Venables is considered one of the best defensive coaches in the game for a reason, so he's going to have them ready, and it'll be a good test. The other side of the ball, that's what I'm worried about.
Definitely. And it could be exposed, it could go badly, but we'll see, because we need to get into our Husker hot topic for the day, which is, what does improvement look like under Mickey Joseph? And I'll start off because we've seen a lot of close games, so I don't think it's the score line that people are obviously going to be interested in. It's going to be the on-field product. How do the players look out there? More importantly, I think, what's the general attitude of the team? How do they react to the tough moments of the game? Because you can bet that an opponent like Oklahoma, they're going to throw some punches. They're going to have Nebraska down at points. Maybe it'll be close. Maybe they'll always be in the game. But I think there's definitely going to be a point in this game where they're going to need to rally. They're going to need to summon up their courage. And we've seen that at various points under Frost's tenure. But if Mickey can achieve that in his first game, I don't think anything would be welcomed by the home fans as much as a team that just keeps on fighting and doesn't make a lot of those same issues we've seen.
Yeah, I want to see cleaner tackling. I know that can't be cleaned up completely overnight, but I want to see that. And then in the event that they're down at halftime, how do they rally?
Yeah.
How do they come out of the locker room? Are they on fire? Are they ready to go? Or are they, defeated before they even get out there? That's what I want to see. I want to see them, not worried about, okay, we're still in this regardless of how much they're down by or up by. That is also a possibility. Anything can happen. But how they come out of halftime, regardless of what they're facing, I think is going to be really important for them.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about maybe the lack of halftime adjustments from the staff in recent games dating back to last year as well. So that'll be a chance, for Joseph and his staff to really kind of reverse that trend, most definitely. And when I'm talking about the demeanor, we saw against North Dakota, against Georgia Southern, not that they weren't confident, but it seemed to me, when those times get tough, there were some players, who might have, started to doubt themselves. And ideally, that's something, obviously, that you want the coaching staff to re-inject that confidence. And, we heard briefly, me and Jimmy Watkins from the World Herald, we heard from O'Shawn Mathis on Sunday after Frost firing. And a quote that got a little bit of run online, O'Shawn said, there's a losing culture around this team. Guys need to have a reason to believe that they can win. And I think that's telling because ultimately, Mickey, he kind of rebuked that on Tuesday, said he doesn't think there's a losing culture, which, it is up for debate, obviously. But I think the telling thing that O'Shawn said was that guys need to believe that they can win because, yes, they have all the talent, they have all the scheming and, the coaching, I think, to get it done, but do they believe it themselves?
Yeah, and that can be such a big barrier. When you don't even realize the potential that you have, it's sad because this team is talented. There's so many talented pieces on this team. And I know that they can win, but do they know that they can win? I mean, when you've been against it for so long, losing so many close games after so many close games after so many close games, I can understand where you lose that.
Yeah.
But it needs to get brought back because if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you? Your coaches are always going to believe in you, but you have to believe in yourself, and they have to because that's what gives you an extra edge.
Let's get you in the locker room before the game, man. I'm getting pumped up. Like let me get out there, man. I believe in myself. So, but we'll see what the tangible on-field improvements are. Mm-hmm. So let's get into our score predictions. Say how we think it's gonna pan out. And I believe the line right now is about 10.5, 11 points. And I'm sticking very close to that in my score prediction. I'm saying Oklahoma 42, Nebraska 31. Like I said, Sooners do have a great defense, so much talent all over the ball. But I think Casey's going to be able to attack a little bit. Anthony Grant, he'll get his time. We'll see 4 straight 100-yard rushing games. That would be really impressive if he can put that together. So I expect this team to kind of be, able to score a few touchdowns. Maybe it's more towards the 21-point mark if Oklahoma plays well. But I think 42 points for the Sooners, given that Georgia Southern just put up 45. I would not be comfortable saying they're going to score any less than 40 based on what we've seen from the defense.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in that same line of thinking as well. I have Oklahoma 45, Nebraska 28. I just think that Oklahoma's defense is better than Georgia Southern's, and I think that they're going to stifle the offense, Nebraska's offense, just a little bit more than we saw last week.
But at the same time, the potential is there for this team to come away with a marquee win. Always a chance, to show up against one of your historic rivals, a top 10 win. What a scene that would be if they really could get it done. And just a matter of days now until they'll hit the field for the first game of the Mickey Joseph era. 11 o'clock on Saturday, big noon kickoff coming. Of course, to Lincoln, they'll be there for the pregame show, all the hoopla that surrounds it, and we'll be there for the coverage, of course. So stick with us. We'll see what happens. Really appreciate all of you tuning in. I know it's been a crazy week. Coach firing. Obviously, we'll have the coaching carousel going in the next few months. So stick with us at the Journal-Star. Really appreciate all of you tuning in. For Amie Just, I've been Luke Mullin. Thank you for listening to episode 7 of the Life in the Red podcast. We'll see you on Saturday.